Chelsea almost every day. I will do a quick little intro about me and public education and how I ended up there, and a little bit about Chelsea, and then Sue asked me to share with you how the pandemic has affected or is still affecting schools, and what we hope to do in partnership between the church and school, and then also hear from you what specific questions or thoughts you have. So I was asked, well, where are you from? I said, Falcon Heights. So I grew up a few blocks from here on California Avenue. I am a Catholic schoolgirl, kindergarten through college, went to St. Rose, and ended up in St. Paul Public Schools about 25 years ago, and adore public education in St. Paul specifically, and have done many jobs in St. Paul schools. Was a kindergarten teacher for years, 3rd grade, 6th grade, then went into coaching and administration. And many of you probably know Principal Gebke, who retired 2 years ago. And so she called me, and this was right after schools shut down the first time. And I was at J.J. Hill over Rondo, Selby, Dale area. And she said, I'm retiring. This is the best school in St. Paul. You need to come here. And to be honest, I would never have left J.J. Hill had it not been in the middle of the pandemic. And I kind of thought, well, why not? Why not? This is showing us that, you just go for some changes. And I left to go to Chelsea for multiple reasons, and one of them is because it's super close to my house, and I'm a mom of 2 kids that go to Falcon Heights Elementary, so that was going to make things easy, super simple. But the other thing is, Chelsea is known as a really special, special place. And I'm not just saying that because you're here, but it does have to do with the support that it gets from the neighborhood, and I think the uniqueness of how interconnected the community is. One thing I noticed immediately when I joined the community is the culture of the parent group and the teachers when anything would go wrong. And lots was going wrong when I started last September. Lots was going wrong. We were starting a school year in distance learning. Everyone's attitude is, how do we support each other? What do we do to help? And parents weren't just advocating for their own child. They really were saying, well, what do we do about the families that don't have the same access as we do? How do we connect other families to Wi-Fi, hotspots, food, basic needs, all of these things? And then the teachers were like that too. And I just thought, oh my goodness, how remarkable would the world be if we all thought like that? If our first question was always, how do we help someone else? What do we do? And I know that growing up Catholic, that's so much of what church communities do too. So I've heard from some of you that you were readers, and we're still in a place now where we can't have reading volunteers. We're really trying to limit the amount of people in the building at this time, and yet we also are hopeful that we'll get there again. So the one opportunity we do have, are any of you some of the volunteers that will be doing the every meal, the delivering the food, or do you know anything about it? Okay, so every meal, it used to be called Sheridan Story. It started in Roseville. I believe the history is that there was a little school called Sheridan Elementary right next to a church. And the church was constantly asking, what can we do to help? And I think a lot of people, they want to help, but people don't really know how. And I believe it took them about 2 years to get this going. But what they were seeing is that for children and families living in poverty, school is where they get their meals. So kids are fed breakfast every day and lunch every day, and those are free for all kids right now. And then, but what happens when they go home on the weekend? And we know that some of them are not being fed or not being fed nutritiously. So this partnership between a church and Sheridan started a program, and now it's called Every Meal, and it's super simple. And there are 3 different kinds. I believe there's an East African option, a Latino option, and then kind of a basic. And it's canned goods, pasta, other vegetables, other things, comes in a little bag. Volunteers from a church partner with the school, usually come in on a Friday, and you go around the school and you put this small bag into a kid's backpack. No one knows. The kids, I remember at J.J. Hill we did this. And one of the kids was like, my backpack's heavy. And I'm like, because you have cans of beans in there, you know. But it's a simple thing. It's a great way to make sure families are being fed over the weekend, and I know that parents have just been so grateful for it. So we're just getting this going. I believe we already have 19 families signed up. So our social worker was connecting with Sue last week, so we should be able to get this up and going really soon. Any questions about that? Not at the time. Okay. So the pandemic in schools. Oh, it's just so hard. I was just saying that everyone, I don't think it's just in education. I think there are so many people that are just hurting right now in general for a variety of reasons. What we have seen in schools is you hear in the media about like this learning loss, and I don't love that term because as a mom that watched my own kids gain a lot of skills, I mean, they can cook a lot for themselves now, more than they could before. Or technology that, you know, at the time I have a 4th grader that's opening Google Slides and making presentations and animating them and speaking into them and coding, all of these things that we know are skills that 21st century kids need. So they did learn a lot. What they didn't get was, my background is early education, so I believe in the power of play, socialization. They missed that. So as a school, we were really focused on our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders. And because we were thinking, you know, some of them have not really had a typical school year yet, and planning of how we were going to support them. And what we quickly saw, you know, it didn't take long in kindergarten, was we should have been thinking about our kindergartners. Because if you think about a 5-year-old, the pandemic started when they were 3 and a half. That is a critical time for brain development in social skills. So we have a lot of kids, and this is all the colleagues I talk to are saying this, kids that haven't really been told no much. And that is not a critique of their parents. I didn't say no to my kids much either. You are handing them things. We were all in such survival mode, but they're used to getting their way. They're not used to sharing. They're not, those social skills that we expect kids to do in order to get along in school are lagging. I'm hearing it from my colleagues at secondary level as well, that you have seniors in high school that are kind of behaving like 15-year-olds, but then they're in the body and development of an 18-year-old. So we've got this disconnect. And what that looks like in a school is more crying than I've seen before, more arguing, more fighting, more flight. Like when we talk about the brain's response to when we get upset, what do? We're seeing that kids just, their outbursts are quicker. And again, this is not a critique of parents because my own children do it, but we're seeing it everywhere. And then that goes to the teacher, or the adults, the staff. Then that's harder on staff because they're concerned about the missed opportunities of learning and focusing on teaching children how to read and math and science and art and all these other things, and yet they also are so attentive to the social emotional needs. Teachers right now are exhausted. I mean, I was at a dance event for my daughter last night and talking to 3 different teachers from 3 different districts, and they're all saying, it feels like May. It feels like May. And I think that is my own psychoanalysis of this too, is that we were heading into this year thinking it was going to be different, thinking that things were going to be better. And when you have that mindset that, oh, we're going to be okay, and then it's not, it's just exhausting. And then, like so many other industries, we're understaffed. So if you know anyone who wants to be a substitute teacher, please tell them to apply online. We're just down. We're down people, and then we also can't rely on the help of volunteers. So that's a lot of bad news and doom and gloom, but I will tell you the good side of it is, oh wow, do I love being back in the building. And like so do the Chelsea teachers and kids. there is so much laughter every day, and families tell us all the time how grateful they are to have their kids back at school and learning. And I mean, we've been in school for a month and we're seeing academic growth and social growth. So I know that it's the right thing to do. And it's like everybody else. We're taking it day by day and really hoping that younger children can get vaccinated very soon. And that there is some light and hope ahead. There always is. Questions or thoughts about anything I've said? Yeah.
As a mom of 3, I would love to know your opinions on how we can better support or uplift those wiped out teachers and staff. What
would support them? Her question was, she has 3 children and how to support the wiped out staff. I think I'm always a huge proponent of kind words matter. I mean, really just letting them know, I'm thinking of you, I hope you have a good day. Or even asking them, what would be helpful for you? Because maybe for them it's like a box of Lysol wipes. And letting them decide. But I think having the kids write them a nice note. And then I think the other thing is that we're in this, there's so many reasons why. I think social media, one of them, but just the culture of email too, the amount of emails and asks that parents are sending of teachers is just unrealistic. Because a teacher's day is primarily with children, and should be. And then, yes, communication home to school is a huge part of our work, and yet the constant emails can get exhausting. And I mean, teachers have said to me, well, I know you don't want me on my phone replying to emails at recess, and I'm like, no, please don't do that. And they've just said the volume's overwhelming. So I think sometimes, like in your community, talking to your friends when they're like, well, I'm gonna email the teacher about this. So, be honest and say, can you give it a pause and just see if they get back, or some, I think that's it too, is like how we talk to other parents, because people are so quick to criticize teachers right now. I think that's a huge piece. And then also, I mean, my biggest thing too is send kind kids to school. Like, that's every day I ask my kids, and so my own children are in 5th and 7th grade, and so they roll their eyes at me at this point, but they know I'm gonna ask every day, what did you do that was kind today? Because it matters. Other thoughts, questions? Yes?
Did any COVID outbreaks over Chelsea at all?
Not yet this year.
Oh, okay.
It's really interesting. We had quite a few positive cases last spring when we came back to school in February. About 2/3 of the school came back. And we had a few positive cases. We did have to quarantine classes and adults. And then that becomes a full-time job in itself, the contact tracing of who is by who. Really luckily, as soon as I say this now, tomorrow I'm gonna get a phone call. But we haven't yet, and I would say this is kind of made up data, just informal conversations with other administrators in the district, we're about half and half. Schools have either had 0 cases so far, or they've had a lot, which suggests what we know about COVID is that it's community spread. And so once one kid comes, or an adult, and tests positive, then all of a sudden it ripples out at that school. But we have been very fortunate, and that's why I also keep saying no to people coming in the building. I just think the less exposure and risk we're at, the better.
Do you think there will be any readers by the end of the year? Do you think that's
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I really do think we'll be able to have readers come in by the end of the year, because when I think about last September where we were, I never would have guessed that we would have been back in the building in February. So this is changing so fast, and I think that there is much more pressure to keep kids in school now, because we saw how hard it was on families to have kids at home. And once that 5 to 11-year-old group can get vaccinated, that's really going to change things. And then we also know in spring, then you're opening the windows up again. So I think unless something, you know, unforeseen, which it could. I had never heard of the Delta variant a year ago. But I really do think we'd be able to have volunteers by spring.
You still have some kids online too?
Well, that's another problem. Well, not problem. I'm a little aware of what words I'm choosing because of this being recorded, but so it is not specifically to Chelsea. So what every school district has handled this a little bit differently. Once we realized that the Delta variant was increasing this spring, and that from what families told us in June, how many families wanted online learning compared to in August, it was, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of families difference. And so St. Paul did put together a kindergarten through 8th grade online program, which now is our largest elementary school in the district. The difference between last year is those children are not tied to Chelsea Heights anymore. They are now in their own standalone program.
So you don't have to worry about teachers at Chelsea are having to do online and teach too at the
And
same
teach,
time?
well, yes and no. One thing is that then because the online school had such a high enrollment, we lost teachers. They had to pull teachers from Chelsea to put them at the online school. So that was one part. Then we don't have to worry about it right now, but if a class were to quarantine or a teacher were, then we would do some type of distance learning or in person and at home. But as of now, no, we're not doing both. Yeah.
Is the staff shortage people who are on the sidelines waiting to come back when things are better, or do you have to find all new candidates, build a new workforce?
I think that's both. I think the staff shortage is a few things. I think that the substitute teacher shortage is definitely due to COVID and due to, I mean, just so many industries are understaffed right now because people have decided through COVID not to go back to their job or they had other options. So the substitute shortage is one piece. The teacher shortage is, teaching is getting harder. What teachers do today in a kindergarten classroom is harder than what I did 6 years ago in the classroom. The needs are getting bigger and the funding's getting less, so the job is getting harder. So I think people are not staying in the profession as long as they used to. And then you also have, we're worried about this time of the young teachers who did not get a true student teaching experience, or because they couldn't get into schools, went into a different major. And so we're not pulling the same amount of people into education as we did before. So people are retiring early too, just saying it's not worth my health anymore. You know, there's a variety of things. So.
Will they still do all the testing that had been done previously? Will you continue to try and do that?
Testing, like for COVID testing or academic assessment? Yes, we are still doing the testing. Yes, last year we had, for the MCAs, that's the big one in Minnesota that happens every spring. There was a higher opt-out, meaning parents chose for their children not to take it. But no, they're going through. We'll still do that. So.
It's amazing what they are doing. My granddaughter goes to Falcon Heights. She's in 4th grade.
Okay.
And she did all Zoom learning last year. Amazing teacher.
Oh.
Cannot tell you how wonderful it was.
What teacher? So that's my son's age.
Mr. Johnson.
Okay. Not the same class then. But yeah.
But he was just incredible.
Oh.
So on days we would have class at our house.
Yeah.
And he would be quick to say, hey, Sophie, you're somewhere new. And
Yeah.
who's that?
Oh.
Or you're with your papa again. So
Yeah.
it really fostered that social environment
to hear. That, I mean, and I think that's the other piece, like one of the reasons that I don't like this learning loss is there were things we learned from it. That like how much easier it is to get to know families. And we had last fall so you do parent-teacher conferences twice a year, typically in the fall and in the spring. And Chelsea has always had a great turnout, but it was 100%. Because there were parents so think about if you're working in an hourly job that you can't take time off and get to the school, but you can step outside on your phone, do a Zoom for 15 minutes with the teacher, like they made it work. So we're responding to that. So this November, we'll have one online conference night and one in person, just to meet the needs of families want different things. And so, I mean, that was, like we've talked about that as a staff too. How do you get to know your families in the same way that you did last year? An extended family, because you're for sure not the only grandparent that was taking care of kids. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about parent engagement with teachers and what would be helpful, but have you seen, we've seen socialization issues with children. Do we also see that with parents?
I don't think as much. I think we see stressed parents. I mean, I have had a few times where I've had to talk to teachers and remind myself that this is not about me. They're not mad at me right now. They're this upset about something else, and sometimes they are that mad about me and that I really do need to do something, but a lot of times there's just so much else going on in life. There's so many stressors. But I don't think so with the parents. No, I mean, maybe at other schools, but again, I mean, the Chelsea parents have just been so supportive. It's been really impressive, and I truly am not just saying that. Like, I have been very impressed with how kind and supportive the community has been.
Is Chelsea still so diverse?
It is. It's similar to J.J. Hill, the other school where I was, that I really like the racial, cultural, and socioeconomic differences that you see at a community like Chelsea. So we are about 46% white students, which when you look at the city of St. Paul, that's similar, but if you look at other St. Paul public schools, that's a much higher percentage of white kids. And then we're about 30% students are black, and within that there are East African who either speak Oromo or Somali, and then we have a growing Karen population, small Hmong population, small Latino population. So it really is, you're seeing, I think this year we have 21 different languages. And then you also see, and I think this is one of the things, and it's lots of research suggests this, that schools do well when you have a range of socioeconomic incomes into a school. So we have families with means who have time to come in during the day and volunteer or donate time and money and all of these other things. And then we do have about a third of our students living in poverty. And living in poverty, the other thing about that is when I hear, and in St. Paul, again, a third, people are like, oh, that's really low. You know, I'm like, it's still a third of our families are living in poverty. And the poverty line is, remarkably low. For a family of four, it's $40,000. That's really, really low. And so there comes a lot of needs with that. So.
Being out of school for as long as they were, those that English is their second language, how are you finding that working this year? Or is it too early to tell?
I think it's probably a little too early to tell on that. The question was about our English language learners, if there are larger gaps than before. We would make the assumption that there would be, because we know that early intervention and immersion is what's going to make a young child absorb multiple languages, which is going to serve them so well later in life. And we just don't know, we don't know yet. I haven't seen it to be any sort of issue, but I would guess that, again, test scores will show. Yeah. So I'm hearing people want to come back in for reading. What are other things that the church has done in the past or would want to do?
The backpack.
Oh, the supply drive?
Supplies, yeah, I think the church has volunteered to school and assemble
Mm-hmm.
the backpacks and put them in the locker.
Okay. And that this year, I mean, Sue brought over a whole trunk full of supplies, and
Yeah.
there were leftover snacks. I'm like, yep, we'll take whatever you get. So, no.
There used to be a science fair that the school would run, and we have a lot of scientists in the congregation.
Okay.
And in the past, a number of them have been invited to come and judge those exhibits and be part of the sort of experience what the kids are doing in science. And that's always been a really healthy thing.
That would be amazing. So there was not a science fair last year, and there will be this year. It used to be in March. We scheduled it in May, so I could get Mr. Altman, we could get those dates so we could make sure that happens. Just moved it back in May, just hoping things would be that much safer by then. But yeah, that would be great.
Continue to let us know.
Okay.
How we can help.
Yeah. I definitely will. I will. I mean, I know it sounds so simple, but I just think like the level of kindness and I think vote for people that are pro schools. Vote for people, like right now, as I've been reading the news before I came here, and there was another large shooting in St. Paul last night. I mean, we have a very real gun problem. I mean, countrywide, but we're really seeing it in St. Paul. So I think voting matters. Not to get too political, but it's just like it weighs really heavy. That then comes into school. Like everyone that was there has little brothers or sisters or children or nieces and nephews that all will come to school on Monday and talk about it. Yeah.
I'm not in St. Paul School District, so I'm not a judge. Are the referendums coming up for St. Paul this election?
Not this year. So the big thing happening in St. Paul this year is a school board race, but we don't have a referendum on the ballot. So we have several new school board seats open, and yeah, Roseville does have a referendum. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no more questions or discussion, let's thank Principal Maura
Oh,
Brink.
thank you. Well, and thank all of you. I appreciate you spending part of a gorgeous Sunday to hear a little bit more about school, and so thank you. It matters.